This society celebrates cultural symbols but ignores structural racism. So voting conservative became a way to move through marginalization. Aligning with the right becomes a signal of belonging.
That's so sad.
It is
to belong.
sad.
Yeah,
it is sad.
Oh, I need to give up my diversity, my diverse identity just to belong. That is so sad.
Yes. But we see this. There is anti-immigrant rhetoric from immigrants themselves. And a lot of these first, second generation, older generations that did have to keep their head down, their mouth shut, that did have to survive the system. And in order to belong, let's just keep doing that. And they don't like it when the younger, those of us, maybe you and I, who are speaking up and out about the oppression that we've seen, about the silencing and the oppression. But it is a way.
They're so used to keeping their mouth shut. That's why.
Yeah.
I like salad. Do you like salad?
Welcome to Canadian Salad,
a fun, factual, and friendly podcast about culture and integration in Canada.
I'm one of your hosts. I'm Ho Shen Ho from China, currently living in Vancouver, unceded territory of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
And I'm your other host, Andrea McCoy, an immigrant from the United States, broadcasting you from the unceded traditional territory of the Lekwungen people, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations.
And you're listening to Canadian Salad.
Welcome back. Another episode, another Canadian Salad, another Hoshin, and another me.
Andrea.
Yes.
Another
that's right. Ha. That's right. That is our names combined, our first letter of our first names. Hoshin, H, Andrea, A. Just in case for those who just didn't know how to spell our names. I'm thinking of you all.
Or the ones who doesn't know how to spell ha.
Or ha. It's a complicated word. It could be,
It could be. Yeah. Today we're not going to talk about spelling.
We're going to talk about the politics of immigration because we just had a national election in Canada, and immigration this election time at least seemed to really be not the hottest topic for Canadians on the ballot, at least to me, because of just the threats from the United States and economic uncertainty, that kind of a thing. But we're going to look at what is the history of immigration in the predominant parties right now, which is the Liberals and Conservatives, and how have they added or taken away from immigration in policies. But then also we're just going to take a very small look at how immigrants voted this election, or at least were projected to vote this election, which I think is very telling of a lot of things. So that's what this episode is about. Before we deep dive, Hoshin, was immigration a priority topic for how you voted this election?
Not this election. This election, not for me. Usually I do. But this election, because I think me and many Canadians just trying to keep the conservative out of the seat. We were trying to, quote unquote, strategic voting and vote for the Liberal and keep them in the office rather than the Conservatives. Yeah. No, I didn't vote.
Immigrant, you're like, man, I don't even know what Carney stands for, but not going to vote for the other guy.
I mean, we just had a Liberal Party in the office, and immigration is, let's say, is not ideal. I don't think, even though, yes, to be honest, I don't know specifically what Carney's stand is in immigration. I just generally know that he is not necessarily pro-immigration, but I don't know specific policies. I know that, it's not going to be that very excellent. Yeah.
I am going to touch on his policies, actually, what he actually created for immigration for his cabinet. So we'll get into that.
I love that. Perfect.
Yes,
what about you? Yeah. What did you vote for immigration?
In a strategic way, yes. I would say I echo much of your point. I think Trump trumped my focus in the sense that Trump's threats really became not only the uncertainty of the future, but all the more I wanted to vote for a platform that I knew weren't going to align themselves with anti-immigrant MAGA, which Pierre Poilievre was very much aligning himself with a lot of those values. A lot of his mentors, Daniel Smith, the Premier of Alberta, also were now facing a separatist movement from Alberta. They want MAGA all the way. So there were a lot of, we covered some conservative candidates even locally in BC who said terrible things about denying residential schools, racial slurs. So the party has not necessarily showcased the pro-immigrant, at least even just a humanitarian immigrant stance. I echo your sentiment, though, too, that Trudeau towards the end was just terrible with immigration. But I also knew that Conservative Party would have been much, much worse.
Yes.
Yeah. And we'll get into which party immigrants leaned. Okay. Anyway, more to come. Stay tuned, everyone. Ooh, it's going to be so nail-bitey.
I think it's going to be with you in 20 minutes.
20 minutes, that's right. Hold on, get your seatbelts on, get your coffee, whiskey, whatever you need. So we're going to just kind of unpack the history of both the Conservative and the Liberal Party. So starting with the Conservative Party, it emerged out of a liberal conservative label founded on upholding tradition, monarchy, and the Church of England. So very much this idea that, we came to Canada, but we are with, the monarchy still. Lo and behold, this first party leader for the Conservative Party was Sir John A. Macdonald. And we both know, maybe not everyone knows, but he was the first Prime Minister of Canada, and he was responsible for residential schools and much of the Indian Act and a lot of the genocide that happened here.
Yes.
Conservatives lost the election in 1896 and actually were unable to gain electoral favor around that time due to their ties to keep Canada Britain. A lot of people that had come here were like, no, we are gradually separating ourselves, and the Conservatives for a while just really wanted to stay tied to that tradition, to that monarchy. I'm going to fast forward because there's a lot of more complicated history with the Conservative Party, but we're going to kind of fast forward to Harper's immigration, which I think is much more relatable, and at least within our generation, Hoshin, you and I. So this is out of Dartmouth Journal of Politics, Economics, and World Affairs. So it was actually Harper's government that created the Canadian Experience class, which of immigration pathway, which emphasized certain skilled professions and a more, quote, stringent language test. So this was a new type of immigration pathway. So if you've been in Canada temporarily and you've got Canadian work experience, hey, we'll look at you and say, hey, you can be a part of this country. The Harper administration also enacted policies to suppress family immigration with a super visa program limiting to 2-year stretches for parents and grandparents with a 10-year cap, and provided only to long-term immigrants who could, quote, prove their strong economic production, end quote. So parents and grandparents, you could come here for the maximum of 10 years, but every 2 years you had to renew the super visa. And just that strong economic production, like, how do you measure that? This is where a lot of the immigration policies, I would say with both parties, get really conflated because they both kind of have these idealized, kind of sugar-coated but vague definitions of what their expectations are, but really it's just undergirded with quite a bit of racism and anti-global majority.
Shocking.
I know. Yeah. No, don't say. The Harper administration also expanded the provincial nominee program, the PNP. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, the province you can apply to be an immigrant to Canada through a provincial nomination program, which the title says of itself. You apply a certain way and the province can, quote, nominate you because they've evaluated your skills, your background, and said, yes, we need this job set in our province, please come. So Harper expanded that PNP program and placed heavy emphasis on employers deciding which immigrants come to Canada based on need. And additionally, they also expanded that with the express entry system. And under Harper, the PNP program increased 550%. So under Harper, as much as there were, Harper definitely had his issues, but as, just from some things though, like the reality that like provinces really took this on because the need was there, obviously, and that program increased. That's a lot. We're going to switch to the Liberal Party. Any thoughts before we switch to the Liberal Party? Are you surprised by any of this?
I mean, not really. The conservative. I mean, I guess the PNP program, the expansion of the PNP program, I guess. I mean, I think from what you said, I think it's not fair to give this hat to this hat of they're anti-immigrant completely to the conservative.
Sure. Yeah.
I guess they're not completely anti-immigrant.
Right. Yeah.
In reality. So I think that kind of changed my perception a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. They've had, there's so much within each party that we could have covered, but within 40 minutes, it's really hard. So this is very high level. I got a lot of this out of the Canadian Encyclopedia, that Dartmouth Journal of Politics, Economics and World Affairs. So if you want to do your own research and do a deep dive, I highly recommend it. So there's pros and cons for the party, but it was interesting though that one of the other things that I failed to mention was that conservatives also have had a harder time to gain Francophone support nationally.
Okay.
And we'll dip in, we saw this in this federal election where a lot of people from Quebec voted for Carney. There were Quebecois that were just like, we will never vote Pierre. That's just, we know what he stands for. But I think that's also tied to the tradition and kind of we don't want to change for anyone. We want a kind of homogenous culture and society. And, we can welcome you, but you just kind of stay on the sidelines. But yeah, that's the Conservative Party. History of the Liberal Party. We're going to move there. It has roots in opposing the elites and the oligarchs who wanted to stay with the monarchy, who wanted to keep that tradition. There's a lot of Francophone influence. So just as the Conservative Party couldn't gain that, it was Francophones who came to Turtle Island and were like, you know what, we fled France. We came here because of opportunities and we don't want ties to Britain. We want our own thing. They have a history of advocating and succeeding in provincial parties. A lot of the provincial parties were in strong opposition against Sir John A. Macdonald and the Conservative parties, interestingly enough. The Liberal Party was first formed in 1873 and rose to prominence as an influential party under Wilfrid Laurier, who preached the, quote, virtues of racial conciliation, end quote, and endorsed aggressive immigration policies to claim the western regions of Canada. This is all out of the Canadian Encyclopedia. He also created the first Canadian Navy, as opposed to contributing to the British Navy. So you can see that the Liberal was trying to separate from England, whereas the Conservatives were really trying to stay with. Yeah. But around 1911, they faced defeat electorally because some were claiming them being pro-American, which there were some Liberal leaders who were expanding their relationships and ties to the Americas, saying, hey, if we're going to build these countries together, let's kind of work together. Let's create trade. Let's, that kind of a thing. But of course, the Conservative Party was like, what are you doing? They revolted. The revolution. Do you not remember? We're going to fast forward to kind of like we did with Harper, but we're going to fast forward to Pierre Trudeau's immigration policies. He is much more kind of really kind of flipped things on its head. So this is again out of the Dartmouth Journal of Politics, Economics and World Affairs. On October 8th, 1971, Liberal Prime Minister Trudeau announced the multiculturalism as an official government policy to, quote, preserve the cultural freedom of individuals and recognize the contributions of diverse ethnic groups in Canadian society. The policy included support to groups helping immigrants overcome settlement barriers, end quote. So this is the first time we see in policy multiculturalism, at least many forms of multiculturalism being expressed on a government level. Now, we'll get into how that's a bit of pomp and circumstance, a bit of symbol, but no substance, but it's there. So we will take that. In 1994, Jean Chrétien, so sorry, my French liberals, stressed the importance of self-sufficient immigrants. They focused on skilled workers rather than family or humanitarian pathways for immigration. So that was around 1994. In 1995, the government introduced the right of landing fee, where they charged people $975 if you came to Canada. And that's around the same time that the PNP program was established. It's a bit reminiscent of a bit of the head tax.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Way more expensive though. The head tax only $50 back then.
But back then, that's probably a lot of, 1995. I mean, that's spendy.
Yeah.
But in the late 80s, immigration demographics shifted and immigrants of European descent became much, much less. And Asian immigrants were the primary source of newcomers. So the Liberal Party, contributed to some of these immigration programs. I would say that we did see more at least from my perspective, there was the Syrian refugee response. I think the minister of IRCC at the time, Minister Hussein, really tried to shorten the workflow for IRCC to just file through applicants because there was such a backlog. And we saw wait times decrease under his leadership. But both parties admittedly had moments of being pro-immigrant, and each of them are responsible for both expanding and restricting immigration policies. And more recently, conservative platforms were all about prioritizing the economic migration streams rather than humanitarian or family reunification streams.
The Liberal Party did pause the family union visas. So that's definitely when you can tell that they are leaning towards the part.
The money part, yes. And even they, for a while, I think for the past at least, maybe longer, but in my recollection, for the past 6 to 8 years, family reunification is a lottery system. So if you have family over somewhere, it's a lottery. And it just breaks my heart because it's like a lottery. It should be about winning vacuum cleaners, not about your family joining you. You know what I mean? Like that just seems really, anyway. Any other thoughts before we get into Mark Carney's platform on immigration?
Oh, I'm actually very excited for Mark Carney's.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay. We're going to just look at the newly elected Prime Minister Mark Carney's platform, who was inaugurated. Like, what's the term in
elected.
The States? No, the ceremony of, so in the States, you inaugurate, the inauguration day is when he swears himself in. So I don't know what it's called in Canada, but anyway.
I actually don't know either. We're amazing Canadians.
We are amazing Canadians. And there are reviewers who would agree. Yeah. But on May 13th, Mark Carney was inducted as the official prime minister. So he was elected, but then he had a ceremony and he unfolded his cabinet and everything like that. So this is just a very high level, again, view of his immigration stance. So I'm just highlighting a few of the pieces. So he wanted to tackle temporary immigration growth. His plan is to minimize temporary foreign workers from 6.2% of Canada's population to 5%.
Oh, wow.
So he wants to bring that down. Of course, capping international student permits, however, based on regional housing and employment. So he wants to increase oversight of institutions relying heavily on international intake, but looking at it from a regional, do you have enough houses for the students to come? Is there enough live? Is there enough jobs? And he's also vowing to have stronger accountability for post-secondary schools and their legal practices. I appreciate this too, because ultimately immigrant or international students are the brunt of people's fraud, their unfair, selling people like fake acceptance letters, and then they come to Canada to find out that they weren't accepted, and then who gets punished? Not the school necessarily, but the person. So I appreciate stronger accountability because I think definitely that needs to happen. The other thing, he wants to align immigration with economic capacity. So he's proposing that his government will conduct quarterly reviews of housing supply, public services, and labor market demands, and then create immigration targets from those reviews.
Oh, that sounds great.
I think that's much more practical, and I think that's better than just saying our target is 500,000.
Yeah, just a random number.
Okay, but do we have because I think we're both pro-immigration, but we want to be smart about it too, and people shouldn't be coming here sleeping on the streets. Like that's not.
It should be sustainable for sure.
Exactly.
I don't think neither of us however many as many as possible immigrants. I don't think that is right, and it's definitely not sustainable.
No.
And I think, as you said, I think it's definitely smarter to base on facts and numbers.
Yes.
To have a immigration number that, that should sustain, that the society can sustain.
Exactly.
And support. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think I feel like that's a little bit of his banking mindset, just kind of if this, then this. Let's look at what we have and build on that. So
let's look at the numbers.
Yeah, let's look at the numbers. He wants to strengthen economic integration for skilled workers, including higher language proficiency standards, pre-arrival credential recognition, which is huge because a lot of immigrants we know come here. Oh, you got a master's degree in Dubai. Who cares?
We don't recognize that. Yeah.
Exactly. So I appreciate that. And then regional incentives for those choosing to live in more rural or smaller urban areas in order to improve those local economies. So creating those incentives. Hey, if you move to, I don't know,
some tiny Prince George.
You can get some incentives for living there so that can boost, because it's true. Like immigration improves economic prosperity. It just does.
I mean,
so
at least one more person to spend money. So yes,
exactly. So that's just a very loose high point of Mark Carney's immigration platform. Any other thoughts related to Mark Carney before we get into how, as you've all been waiting on bated breath, how immigrants were set to vote this election?
Mark Carney, I am a little bit surprised, but I should not be, because he's a reasonable guy based on everything he said. Also, he used to be the Minister of Finance. So I also should not be surprised that he is like a numbers guy, which, I'm just, also, but slightly surprised that actually in many ways, he's like, not necessarily like against immigration like the previous, like Justin do. So that I'd be surprised.
Yes. Yeah. We'll see how he delivers,
Yeah, let's see how he delivers.
Yeah. And I hope we can advocate for that and keep him accountable. I mean, that's ultimately.
Because words are empty.
Exactly. They are empty until there's action behind it, or lack of action behind it. Yeah. So to end, we're going to just kind of take a very loose look at how immigrants were estimated, or at least projected, to vote. And it'll take some time to really see how people who with immigration status voted this election. But this is what was projected. So there was a Nanos research poll that came out in April of 2025. This is with CTV News. And for those of you who are new, we do post all of our links on our website, so you can go to this data
check it
directly.
Out.
Yes. They stated that first-generation Canadians had about 46% favoring Liberals, with 36% favoring Conservatives, and second-generation immigrants about the same. Those who had been in Canada for 3 generations, 40.6% favored Liberals and 40.7% favored Conservatives.
Oh.
Yes. Yes. A Canada national poll from January found that majority of East Asian and South Asian expressed support for the Conservative Party. It was very neck and neck, just like most of Canada. And I was actually shocked to see, because of the ways in which not only the reputation that Poilievre had with MAGA, we've read their platforms about immigration, about even women equality, the environment, Indigenous relations. But there was a very good study, and I highly recommend people to go through this. But the study, it was by Amin Fidan Elsiglu, and the study was called I Began to Think More Like a Canadian, How Second Generation South Asian and Chinese Canadians Confront Racism by Becoming Conservative Voters. Very fascinating read. Oh. But this person, Amin, found that the majority of racialized immigrants don't vote conservative because they're unaware of inequality. They vote conservative because they're trying to navigate it.
Wow.
Because over time, they've had to watch parents and families pressured to quote unquote Canadianize themselves, whether it be their names, their accents. They've seen them sidelined by employers in a society, even though we celebrate that multiculturalism, this society celebrates cultural symbols but ignores structural racism. So voting conservative became a way to move through marginalization. Aligning with the right becomes a signal of belonging. this is how my parents
so
survived. Yeah. But is that
that's so sad.
It
to,
is
to belong.
sad.
Yeah,
It is sad.
I need to give up my diversity, my diverse identity just to belong. That is so sad.
Yes. But we see this. There is anti-immigrant rhetoric from immigrants themselves. And a lot of these first, second generation, older generations that did have to keep their head down, their mouth shut, that did have to survive this system. And in order to belong, let's just keep doing that. And they don't like it when the younger, those of us, maybe you and I, who are speaking up and out about the oppression that we've seen, about the silencing and the oppression. But it is a way.
They're so used to keeping their mouth shut. That's why.
Yeah.
That's why they're unhappy that we speak up.
East Asian, like 55% of East Asians were projected to vote for conservatives, and 56% of South Asians expressed support for the conservatives. You know, even though it reinforces that ability for Canadians to discriminate and oppress, there's always a cost for a system that forgets you. But the reality is, at the end of the day, you understand how power works and you know how to navigate it. And that's part of you becoming Canadian, because that's the system.
I think I would like to also say that probably part of it is also because as an East Asian, I think a lot of East Asians also coming here with very conservative mindset in terms of maybe, yes, immigration probably is one thing that they consider when they vote. But the other thing that I think a lot of them will consider is also like maybe like LGBT rights, family values, economy or taxation. Right. I think socialist, not necessarily, because I think the conservatives definitely very capitalist compared to a lot of other parties. They're more like socialists. I think I know a lot of, when I was doing the kind of canvassing for NDP, a lot of East Asian that I talk about, they really care about, they only want to know like taxation, for example. It's the money part that they care about.
And that's how.
And they generally think that the conservatives is better for their pocket. Even though I think I try to argue with them that the conservatives are good for the pocket of the rich. Are you part of the rich? Or are you just middle class? Because if you're middle class, I don't think they are here for you.
But that's what's been sold to them. In some ways, to be Canadian or to be respectable is to have money. Because you see the ways in which, I mean, no one is an idiot when they look around and they see the ways in which rich get away with a lot of things, or they get prestige, they get opportunities. So I don't blame people. At the same time, it is this very complicated web of internalized, racism. It is the system that is known for its multicultural symbolism is not known for its systemic justice. It's sad, but it also it's eye-opening too, because I just would assume that just be, vote for the guy who's not going to, just not hate you. But at least it's kind of like survivors of trauma or even of war. I had heard prisoner of wars, they, when they're released, they don't know, they're more scared of leaving the prison cell because they don't know how to navigate the uncertainty, but they know how to survive the cage.
I think the other thing is also about education.
Sure.
I mean, sometimes it's also this kind of old stereotype or perception. A lot of older generation, first generation immigrant, I think they tend to be older, right? They have, like, for example, when I was canvassing again, a lot of conversation brought up also because of drugs, for example, or the Liberal Party or the NDP. The Liberal Party like legalized marijuana, and they want to legalize more, and the NDP want to build more safe injection centers. That's all bad. Society gonna crumble because of that. And just like when they say that, you can't argue with them because they already have a set mindset. This is bad. Marijuana is bad. Safe instruction center is bad, and that's all they're voting for because they think all these things that they mentioned is gonna kill the society, and the conservative does not want any of that. So conservative for them is a friend.
Yeah. I mean, messaging is also really powerful. I mean, we saw a lot of immigrants, a lot of people of color vote for even Trump. And we see the projections for, a lot of immigrants voting for the Conservative Party. And I think that has also a lot to do with someone saying, hey, you should be able to afford a house. Hey, the guy who wants me to buy a house, that's the guy I'm voting for. The guy who wants eggs that are affordable, yes, that's right. But you're true. There's so many layers to why I think more immigrants, we're siding with conservatives, whether it's traditional values, whether it's maybe
education.
lack of education, and also just, the messaging. But I think that undercurrent of, racism and accepting the status quo is also a big component that I don't know that we're comfortable talking about, because we haven't been given safe spaces to really talk about that. At least a lot of generations of immigrants, right?
Oof,
So,
many. Yeah.
yes. So
Wow.
that's our episode.
Yes, thank you.
Lots
for
to chew
listening.
on. Yes.
I know. I learned a lot for sure. Thank you, Andrea, for prepping that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We're going to get into our Canadian Salad Pop quiz, which is the final event.
Yeah, for the one who has not listened to us before, Canadian Pop Quiz is a segment that we ask each other questions that we have not been prepped for, and then we just, guess what it is.
Yeah, that's right. Hoshin, would you like to ask your question first? Let's see if I'll get it.
Oh, so kind. Such a
You're
gentleman.
welcome.
Gentlewoman.
Some
My
days.
question is very simple. I think you know
Okay.
it. I hope you do.
Okay.
How many prime ministers had Canada had?
Oh, dang. I don't know this.
But I think you know, because even when they announced Mark Carney is Canadians' number
Canada's... No, I didn't hear. I'm going
per
to say
prime minister.
37?
37?
I don't know.
The answer is 24th.
24. Okay.
Yeah, Mark Carney is Canada's 24th prime minister.
Wow. Okay. That's true, because prime ministers can have longer terms.
True. I mean,
than
Trudeau
what
was
I'm
like
used
10
to.
years.
Yeah,
It was
exactly.
like a decade. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
it's a long time. Okay, 24. Wow, that is okay. 24,
24.
24 hours in a day, 24 prime ministers in a country. Is that okay? Anyway, all right, Hoshin, my question to you is, how many people voted this last federal election, 2025?
People?
How many? What was the total number?
What? Oh my God. I don't know.
Just
200
guess.
million.
Do you want to call your grandma?
50-50, please.
50-50.
I don't know, 200 million?
200 million? Okay. Is that your final answer?
Yes, because I have no clue.
Okay. It is more than 19.5 million voters cast a ballot. 19.5 million in the federal election. Yes. So 68% of eligible voters voted this time.
Oh. That's,
yes.
Okay.
It did not surpass the record in March 1958 when 79.4% of eligible Canadians voted. But big turnout this election. So big from 1958. I don't know what's happening in 1958. I'd be curious to see what was happening around that time. But
I know, because I think more people should vote.
More people should vote. It's true.
Yeah.
It's
I went
true.
on a date, not recently, a couple months ago, and the guy said, he's born and raised Canadian, by the way. He said he never voted. I was like, the day is done. I'm going home now.
We're done. Bye. Wow.
I know.
Just, yeah.
And he's gay himself, obviously. So I was like, girl, you are tired.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're
And to convince
canceled.
someone to care. And that's just it. I mean, politics, we've looked at politics. They do have a huge impact. They can.
No, I feel like if
what
you
happens.
unless you're like a cis white man that's not immigrant, otherwise you should care. You really should, because politics really affect you.
They do.
If you're a cis
They
white
do.
man, everyone in the office will they care about you, so you probably don't really need to care about voting.
Yeah.
Because the system is always
In
going to
fact,
feel
could you not vote so that the rest of us can vote for the kinder people? Thank you.
True. Exactly.
Yeah,
But if
yeah.
you're not that category, you should care.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Way to go. Stick it to him. Yeah.
I agree. That's why. Okay,
Yeah.
everyone who's listening, if you want to go on a date with him, just make sure that you vote.
And if you didn't vote, then brush up on your politics, because Hoshin knows a thing or two. So
Yes.
interested applicants can message us on our
Please do.
website. Yeah.
Yeah, on our website.
We're a dating
Canadian
podcast now.
Salad,
Yes.
CanadianSalad.ca. You can also email us. Hello
Yes.
at CanadianSalad.ca.
Yes. Yeah. Or you can slide into our DMs on TikTok, on Instagram, Blue Sky. And you can find both Hosh and I on LinkedIn too. We are professionals.
Exactly.
I know,
So
it's
you can slide
shocking.
to my DM.
Yes, slide to Hoshin's, not mine. But if you do, I'll direct you to Hoshin. But yes, thank you for joining this dating/cultural education podcast. Please do leave us a review, share us with your friends and family, and join us next week for an all-new episode. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Canadian Salad is written and produced in British Columbia, Canada by Hoshin Ho and Andrea McCoy. Theme music is by Naver Avetyan from Pixabay.
This has been a good Drinklin production.